Good morning, fifth grade. We are going to continue reading about Cesar Chavez, one of my favorite people in American history. Before we begin, we just want you to jog your memory about what his life was like, what he was like at the beginning of his life. And so our quick write says, describe how Cesar's life changed when he moved to California at age 10. And so you can look at the first couple of paragraphs about what his life was like in Arizona, and then he transitions to California about here. So you can go back in your text and think about how his life is different. This is also a good paragraph when you're thinking about how his life changed. Okay, we know that his family became migrant workers. They lost their farm and they had to work on other people's farms, and they didn't live in a nice house anymore. Instead, they had to live in old sheds, which were probably similar to the shanty towns that people lived in cities during the Great Depression. And we know that because it's 1937. This is the same time period as the Great Depression. Okay? And then we also know that they had a hard time saving money. Their whole family only made 30 cents a day. And we know Cesar came from a really big family. And so even with all of them working, they were all together, they were only paid 30 cents a day. All right, and so we ended yesterday thinking about how Cesar felt powerless, but he never forgot his old life in Arizona and how much he enjoyed doing farm work there, and he knew he didn't have to be miserable. He could still do the job that he loved, which was working on the farm, but he didn't have to be miserable while he did it. And so today we're going to begin our story in the middle of the second page where it says reluctantly. And our focus question is still the same. We want to know, how does Cesar Chavez respond to challenge, and what does this reveal about him as a person? We have 3 vocabulary words we need you to think about. The first one is compassionate. That's feeling or showing sympathy or concern for others. And so this first picture, our second vocabulary word is pity, and that's when you feel sorrow or compassion for someone. So compassion and pity, and that could be this picture. Compassion and pity are synonyms, so you could actually draw lines for both words to both pictures. And then the last word is strike. It's a refusal to work, and it's organized by employees as a form of protest, usually so that they can get better working conditions from their employer. So it's like they'll say, we are not going to work for you unless you give us more money, unless you let us take breaks, something like that. And that's this picture. All right, we're going to keep reading where it says reluctantly. And remember, we're using CSPS. So who is Cesar and what is he like? Where is he at this point in our story? What problems does he encounter and how does he solve them? Reluctantly, he started paying attention to the outsiders. He began to think that maybe there was hope, and in his early 20s, he decided to dedicate the rest of his life to fighting for a change. That last sentence, I want you to write down where it says character. In his early 20s, he decided to dedicate the rest of his life to fighting for a change. And the whole rest of the story, we're going to see how Cesar, what changes he made for farm workers in the United States. You can press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready. As he crisscrossed California, this time to talk to people. Again, he crisscrossed California, and so that's our setting. He crisscrossed California, this time to talk to people about joining his fight. At first, out of every 100 workers he talked to, perhaps one agreed with him. One by one, this is how he started. So our setting is in California, and it's all over California because it says he crisscrossed California. And the reason he crisscrossed California is because he was trying to talk to people into joining his fight to improve the lives of farm workers. So you can write that down for the setting. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready. It says, at the first meeting Cesar organized, a dozen women gathered. He sat quietly in a corner. After 20 minutes, everyone started wondering when the organizer would show up. Cesar thought he might die of embarrassment. Well, I'm the organizer, he said, and forced himself to keep talking, hoping to inspire respect with his new suit and a mustache he was trying to grow. The women listened politely, and he was sure they did so out of pity. Despite his shyness, Cesar showed a knack for solving problems. That's a great quote. That's another great quote to write for character. Even though he was really shy, people recognized that he was good at solving problems and people trusted him. So write that down in the second part for character. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready to keep going. With workers, he was endlessly patient and compassionate. Oh, two more character traits that are really good. With landowners, he was stubborn, demanding, and single-minded. So depending on who he was talking to, Cesar responded in a different way. If he was talking to workers like himself, he was going to be patient, compassionate. If he was talking to the landowners, the people who he was trying to get to change things, he was stubborn. He wasn't going to give in to them. He was going to make sure they did what he asked. In a fight for justice, he told everyone, I forgot this part, he was learning to be a fighter. In a fight for justice, he told everyone, truth was a better weapon than violence. Nonviolence, he said, takes more guts. It meant using imagination to find ways to overcome powerlessness. This part is crucial to the farm workers movement. And this is where Cesar Chavez and Martin Luther King Jr. are like-minded, even though these events were going on at about the same time. Okay, and so Cesar Chavez was off in California talking about nonviolence with the farm workers movement, and Martin Luther King Jr. Was on the East Coast in the South, in Alabama and Georgia and the Carolinas, talking about nonviolence as well. So these men are very similar. They're both trying to improve the lives of a group of people through the means of nonviolence. We're going to keep going. More and more people listened. One night, 150 people poured into an old abandoned theater in Fresno. At this first meeting, the National Farm Workers Association, Cesar unveiled its flag, a bold black eagle, the sacred bird of the Aztec Indians. La Causa, the cause, was born. It was time to rebel, and the place was Delano. Here in the heart of the lush San Joaquin Valley, brilliant green vineyards reached toward every horizon. Poorly paid workers hunched over grapevines for most of each year. Then, in 1965, the vineyard owners cut their pay even further. I want you to highlight that sentence. That's our first problem. Cesar is trying to get people to join his movement, and then in 1965, the vineyard landowners, vineyards are places where they grow grapes, they cut the farm workers' pay even further. And we know they were only making 30 cents a day with their whole family pulling all their money together. And so now they're making even less. And so that's their problem. Let's keep reading to find out how Cesar and the Farm Workers Association solves their problem. Cesar chose to fight just one of the 40 landowners, hopeful that others would get the message. As plump grapes drooped, thousands of workers walked off that company's fields in a strike, or huelga. All right, that's the first attempt at a solution. And there's going to be another one, but the workers went on strike in an attempt to get more money from the landowners. Grapes then ripe did not last long. So that means because the workers walked off the land on a strike, all of the fruit that was ready to be picked wasn't being picked, and instead it rotted. And the landowners lost all that money they would have made if they had picked the grapes and then sold them. The company fought back with everyone from punches to bullets. Cesar refused to respond with violence. Violence would only hurt La Causa. Okay, and that's the second part of the problem and solution. The company fought back with everything from punches to bullets. That's the second part of the problem. But Cesar and his movement, the Farm Workers Association, they did not respond with violence. Instead, we can read the next sentence. Instead, he organized a march of more than 300 miles. He and his supporters would walk from Delano to the state capitol in Sacramento to ask for the government's help. That's the second part of the solution. And I know this should really remind you of what you already know about Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement. Martin Luther King Jr. also led a march from Selma, Alabama to Montgomery, Alabama. And there were several other marches. There was the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom as well. And so both men used marches and strikes as methods for change instead of violence. All right, and then you can say, how does Cesar respond to challenge? What does this reveal about him as a person? Please include the information about responding with non-violence and what that reveals about him as a person. You can also use a vocabulary word, compassionate, to help you.